about to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's be free with Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Jim here at Tutor2. Welcome you to our 10th live GCSE Sociology revision blast. And today I'm joined by Duncan in the middle, which means it's Vicky on the right.
Hi.
Welcome to you both. Two well-known faces to everyone who has attended either live or on replay our previous 9.
Yeah.
I worked that one out, Duncan and Vicky. Previous 9.
Good maths.
Thank you very much. Sessions. And the session numbers have been fantastic. Lots of people joining us live, as I can see, but also, I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds, in fact, several thousand students have watched the last 2 or 3 sessions. And this is a new session on research methods, which I think we did in the 5th, session 5. Went down really well, really useful. So a chance to, all new content, of course, as well. A chance to cover this really important topic. What kinds of stuff are we covering, Vicky, Duncan? Just give me a flavour and then we'll crack on.
So we're looking at the key methods again that we have talked about in the past, and we're going to have a look at them in context with some of those key studies. And again, the key studies keep coming backwards and forwards throughout our revision blast. We're going to put some knowledge, we're sort of going to test some knowledge today, like we said, thinking about that application. And we're also going to think about sort of analysis and also how you'd evaluate some of those research methods that you will come across in the course. So hopefully by the end of the session, you will feel a little bit more confident with your research methods, and you'll be able to give us some good examples of where they've been used and how successful they've been as well.
Oh, fantastic stuff. Yeah.
We've got 5 activities today based on those.
That's brilliant. I know some of those activities might be multiple choice, in which case, if you're live, type A, B, C, or D into the live chat. Obviously, if you're watching on replay, you can pause the video, maybe give yourself a bit more time to think about what your response would have been. And other times it might be that Vicky and Duncan would, if you're live again, want you to sort of type an idea or an answer suggestion into the chat window. Again, if you watch on replay, no pressure to do that, but maybe you want to write down or scribble down your thoughts and compare them with the suggested answers that Vicky and Duncan give us. Sounds really good. I think we're good to go. Shall we make a start?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so we're starting with some multiple choice questions. So straightforward here, as Jim said, A, B, C, or D. Just type it in the chat window if you're watching live. You've obviously got the chance to pause the video if you're watching on catch-up. So which of the following is not a practical consideration for researchers? Travel implications, time taken, financial costs, anonymity. Okay, A, B, C, or D. Which of those is not a practical consideration? So they're all considerations, but they're not necessarily all to do with the practicality of the study. So we've got some answers coming in really quickly. Holly, Abby coming in with D. Should we have a look? Well done, you are absolutely correct. So the others, things like money, cost, time taken, that's the sort of practical stuff. Anonymity would be more to do with ethics. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. Which of these is not an ethical consideration for researchers? So again, which is not an ethical consideration, we've got informed consent, the avoidance of harm, confidentiality, and sample size. What do we reckon? We're coming in with D again. They're not all D, I promise. But shall we have a look? Okay, well done. Yeah, it is sample size. So the first three very much to do with ethics. The last one is more to do with representativeness, which then might also link to things like reliability. Okay, shall we have a look at the next one? Which of the following is not a primary source of data? Participant observation, official statistics, a group interview, or a questionnaire, for example, a pre-coded questionnaire, so one where you're ticking A, B, C's or D's, like this one. Okay, Ellie's come in with official statistics, and Abby also said B, Unicorn Lover said B. Shall we have a look? Yeah, brilliant. Well done, guys. Doing very well. Yeah, the others are primary sources of data. Official statistics is secondary data. The research has already been done. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. Which of the following does not refer to the process of using more than one source of data? So this one's pretty tricky for GCSE students, but I feel the way you're doing here, you're gonna be straight in there with this one as well. So mixed methods, triangulation, qualitative data, or methodological pluralism. Now, I know we sometimes have a few A-level revisers who come along to the GCSE sessions as well, which is a very sensible thing to do. And I'm sure any A-level revisers will be straight in with this one. It is quite tricky, but just have a think about, you can either do process of elimination, or you might know that one of them isn't really to do with that. Yeah, Abby's saying C. Shall we have a look? Yeah, it is C. Well done. So mixed methods is, as it suggests, using a range of methods. Triangulation is where you use quantitative and qualitative data to try and get reliability and validity. Methodological pluralism is a similar idea to using a plurality of methods, using lots of different methods. So it literally just means that. Okay, so well done. Qualitative data is obviously the opposite of quantitative data, so not to do with multiple methods. What is the name of the sampling type? This is the last of the MCQs, by the way. What is the name of the sampling type which requires participants to recommend personal contacts? So if you think about different ways that sociologists might find their sample, if they did a questionnaire or something like that, there are various ways that they might find people to answer their questions. One of those involves getting people, your participants, to recommend further people. Okay, Holly's suggesting B. Shall we have a look? Well done, it is B. Very good. So some great answers coming in there. So snowball something is, as the idea, it's a bit like a chain letter, if you like. It's the the sample kind of snowballs because people pass it on to their contacts and then it grows. So it doesn't give you a particularly representative sample, but it can give you a big one. Okay, whereas the others are more methods for trying to get a representative sample. Okay, so that's the last of the MCQs. It's still me for this one, actually. This is a new activity for GCSE Sociology. So if you've joined us before, you won't have seen this method unless you've been to another subject that's used it. It's the Suitcase Scanner. We've got a suitcase here. In a moment, we're going to get, like, as if we're at the airport or whatever, we're going to scan the suitcase and see what's inside it. All I want you to try and see is what type of data that we can see. So it's going to show a chart or a graph or something, and I want you to tell me what type of data it is. So we're not having to try and interpret the data, it's just what type of data it is. Okay, shall we have a look? That's clever, isn't it? I think it comes back again, so you get another chance. Okay, so what type of data was that concealed in the suitcase? All right, Holly's come straight in and said it was quantitative data, which is brilliant. Well done. Can we say one other thing about it as well as it being quantitative? So Unicorns also said it's quantitative data. Yeah, absolutely right. It is quantitative data. What we saw there were divorce rates over time. Actually, a very interesting graph worth taking a look at to see the changes in that over time. And Unicorn Lover has also pointed out that it's secondary data. So it's quantitative data and it's secondary data. Brilliant. Well done. It's secondary data, quantitative data. There's the graph. Very interesting graph. You can see the big increase in divorces following the Divorce Reform Act in the late 60s and a slow trending down in more recent time. Okay, that's brilliant. I'm going to hand over to Vicky again now. Well done.
Thank you very much. So we're going to do the red herring activity this time. And I've got 5 red herring quizzes for you. And these are to do with, again, obviously research methods. The first one starts off very easy, and we've kind of talked about it already this session. But then we're going to start thinking a bit more about these research methods in context. And we're going to think about where some of these have been used before. So can we please have the first activity up on the screen, please, Jim? So with the red herring quiz, we've used it before, not actually with this template with the actual fish on it. So this is a new one, but we used it before. And the idea here is that 3 of the phrases on the screen in front of you have something in common. And 1 is the red herring, so it is completely separate from the rest of them. So I'm going to give you a moment to have a look and see which one you think perhaps is not linked to the other. So we've got A, financial cost, B, participation versus non-participation, C, covert versus overt, and D, issues around personal safety. So which one is a red herring? So the letter of the red herring, and then next to it, could you tell me what links the rest of them? So I'm just going to give you a moment. Okay, we've got D coming up at the moment, which is not actually the correct red herring in this case. So have another look and see which one you think might be the red herring here.
There's sort of 2 bits of the activity, really, isn't there? Because you've got to try and find the connection and then which one doesn't connect. I could see how you might have gone for D. Ooh,
Excellent. We have got the right answer coming up now, though. Excellent. So, Unicorn Lover, you are correct with A. So what do we think connects B, C, and D? Okay, so a couple more people coming through with A. So financial cost is our red herring. But what do we think the connection is between the other 3? Give you another moment, and then we'll
I'm going to give you a clue. It's to do with a particular method, isn't it?
It is to do with a particular method.
Or type of method.
Okay, any ideas? Okay, so we've got some good suggestions coming through. Jim, can we have the answer revealed, please? So our linked fishes are all important considerations for observation. So financial cost is not an important consideration here. Whether you decide to do covert or overt, so whether the people that that you are observing know what you're doing, or whether it's participation or non-participation. So are you joining in or are you watching from afar? Both of those have a real issue with consent and also changes to behaviour. So we've talked about that before, and it's going to come up a bit later again. And also personal safety. So lots of you will be be familiar with the James Patrick Glasgow gang study, and his safety was in question throughout that. Okay, Jim, can we have the second red herring quiz, please? Okay, so this time we are looking for something, a phrase that we have seen a few times over the last few weeks. So our fishes are the Chicago factory workers, El Tomeo, time consuming, and observation changes behaviour. So which one of those is the odd one out, and what connects the other three? What do we think? Okay, we've got some good ideas coming through.
So what's a red herring? Someone's asked. So it's a phrase that we use to say, meaning like the odd one out, or
yeah. It's basically something that's put in there like a trick to kind of trip you up. Okay, so we have Holly coming through with B. Excellent. Okay, a couple more saying B. Excellent. So you are correct. B is the red herring, in this case, the odd one out. So what do we think connects A, C, and D? And it does link to our first quiz today. Okay, what do we think? So B is our odd one out. What's the connection? So El Tomeo did a study, it involved Chicago factory workers, and he observed that people observed change their behaviour. He gave this a particular name that we have talked about before.
I don't know if we've mentioned it today, have we?
We haven't mentioned it today, no, but I think I'm pretty sure it was mentioned last week, actually, Duncan.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Yeah.
So, Jim, can we have that reveal, please? Perfect. The link is the Hawthorne effect. So we have come across it before. It's the idea of change. The actual act of being observed makes people change their behaviour a little bit. A bit like if a teacher was being observed. Well done, Holly. They might suddenly freeze because they are they're just like really shocked and don't want to be observed, and suddenly they sort of forget their subject knowledge, forget how to teach, all that sort of stuff there. Okay, third one, please, Jim. Okay, so we're now having a think about which, so we're going to look at studies now which have used certain methods. So the odd one out, again, is a study that has used a different method to the other three. Okay, so we've got Halsey, Heath and Ridge, we've got Pete Townsend, we've got Paul Willis, that should read, and Anne Oakley. Okay, so which is a red herring? So which person uses a different method of research? So think about their study. So Anne Oakley did some work into domestic roles. Pete Townsend, we've talked about him recently. He looked at deprivation. Paul Willis did some research into education, as did Halsey, Heath and Ridge. What do we think? Okay, with some good answers coming up. Okay, somebody's gone with Anne Oakley. She is not our odd one out in this case. I'll give you a couple more minutes. I think this is I think we're getting quite tricky now. Lots of you will remember the studies, but it's not always easy to remember what methods they use. But obviously, it is. You do need to know them.
And at least one of them used more than one method, which confuses me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I've got another, one of the next ones is going to confuse for that reason as well. Okay, so our odd one out. Can we have the answers revealed, please, Jim? I think this is a tricky one. Actually, no, I was about to say somebody's got the right answer, but no, they haven't. So our odd one out here is Paul Willis. So the others used questionnaires to complete their research. So Pete Townsend put together a deprivation index. Anne Oakley did a big survey into domestic roles, and Halsey, Heath and Ridge looked at class inequalities in education. They did that with a big questionnaire, whereas Paul Willis, lots of you will remember him from the Learning to Labour study, which we also know as a LADS, and he did that through observation. Okay, number 4, please, Jim. So again, we're looking for the odd sociologist out, or group of sociologists, or pair, and we're thinking about which method connects the others. So we've got Charles Murray, got Ballbaum and Gertowitz, we've got the Rappaports, and we have got Fiona Devine. So who is the odd one out? Who use a slightly different method? have a look. So again, maybe think about what they did. So Charles Murray features in social stratification. The Rappaports are in family. Okay, Fiona Devine, we've kind of looked. We talked about her a few weeks ago. Again, stratification. Ball Bowengowitz in the education unit. Excellent. So we have a couple of suggestions here of C. Okay, let's see if we've got anybody else coming up. Quite a difficult one. Okay, so a couple of people have suggested the Rappaports. Okay, not correct in this case. I'll give you another couple of moments. So again, really tricky, but the reason we put this activity in today is to get you thinking about what methods were actually used by these studies. Lots of people know the content of the studies, but not always how that data was collected in the first place. Okay, can we please have the answers up then, Jim? So we have Charles Murray as our red herring this time, and the link is using interviews to complete their research. So the Rappaports looked into family diversity. They did that through interviews. Fiona Devine did her affluent worker revisited, where she interviewed factory workers. We talked about this a couple of weeks back, so please have a look in one of our previous sessions for that one. And Bullbauer and Gertwitz, look, they interviewed parents about the impact of league tables, so whether how well a school had done actually affected your likeliness to send your kids there. Right, we have one last red herring. Okay. Think about the methods that we've already talked about. So we've got Pat Collins, Stephen Ball, we've got James Patrick, and we have Sylvia Wolby. All of these sociologists have featured over the last few weeks in one way or another. Again, who is the red herring? What connects the other one? So who use a different method than the others? And we have already talked about one of these guys today. Oh, learning to labour, I love the request for some of these sessions on food technology. If I talked to you about food technology, I'd be no help whatsoever. Okay, who do we think then? So we have 4 sociologists on the screen. Who is the odd one out, and what is connecting them? Again,
I wonder if people will know James Patrick, because he's not one of our key studies, but you might cover him when thinking about one of the methods.
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting study, isn't it? So I think quite a lot of teachers choose to use it, even though it's, like you say, it's not actually on the spec.
It's often used as an example of a particular problem with one of the methods.
Yeah. Okay, Jim, can we have the answer to this one? I think this one is really causing a bit of an issue today. So it is observation. So we have Sylvia Warby, who did not use observation. She's a feminist. We've talked about her recently. She did lots of research into patriarchal structures, but she did not use observation for that. Pat Collins did. She observed women in prison before conducting interviews. So she kind of used that time to get to know those women, so she could then write some good questions that she thought they would answer. Stephen Ball, we've talked about him the last couple of weeks. So he observed beachside comp to look at the effects of setting, and we've talked about James Patrick, kind of mentioned him as well. He did a really interesting study about Glasgow gangs, where he pretended to be a gang member himself to kind of look at why teenage boys were joining gangs. Thank you very much. Some really good answers coming through there. So I'm going to hand back to Duncan for a Give Me 3 activity.
Okay, so we're going to look at some research methods again now, just a couple of them. And what we're going to ask you is to, in a short space of time, and give you a little buzz on the timer, come up with 3, in this case, to start with, criticisms of overt participant observations. So these are sort of questions you could be asked. You'd never get a 12-mark question just on research methods, but you could get a short mark question, to say a criticism of a particular method, for example. So could you give me 3, or try and give me 3 criticisms of overt participant observations? You can put 1 in to start with. Okay, let's have a go. Hi, learning to labour. So overt means open. That's where the people who are being researched know that they are being researched. Okay, so a way of remembering that is overt, open, covert, undercover. Okay. quite like this tune.
It's quite jazzy, isn't it?
It is, but the 30 seconds goes really fast. Wow, those 30 seconds go fast. Has anyone got any criticisms of overt participant observations? We've heard about one in the last activity, actually. Vicky told you about one, drawing the red herring activity. Trying to remember who was the first to get it. Okay, so we've got difficult to repeat. So yeah, there's problems with reliability and repeatability. Absolutely. That's good. Well done. Any other suggestions for what might be a problem with overt participant observations? Okay, so problems with reliability is undoubtedly one of them. What else? What did... oh, and Jade's got a sociology exam tomorrow. Might get this question. So
Jade.
It's good help. You never know. Okay, shall we have a look at some suggestions? So we got reliability in the chat window. There's also the Hawthorne effect, which we talked about in the last activity. I thought someone might come in with that one. So again, that's the idea that people who are being observed, know they're being observed, do behave differently. And that therefore affects the validity of the research, because what you're seeing isn't necessarily a true picture. We've got practical issues, take a long time to do observations. Gatekeepers, that's the idea that there are people who can prevent you from doing observations. Say if you wanted to do some research in a school and you wanted to observe some lessons, you know, the head teacher would have to give permission, parents might have to give consent, etc. So there are these various gatekeepers. And then this very much links to the point about repeatability and reliability. It's hard to produce quantifiable data. A lot of it's down to the researcher's interpretation. So there are those issues with reliability as he got. Okay, we've just got one more of these. So let's see how you do with this one. It's going to be another give me three. It's also, again, about criticisms or drawbacks, this time of using questionnaires. We'll leave it nice and open. So all types of questionnaires, but think about the ones perhaps particularly where you're just ticking a box or saying A, B, C, or D, or whatever. There might be some particular problems with those, but you can think about other issues too. Okay, so 30 seconds. Give me some drawbacks or criticisms of using questionnaires. Jade's asking how long this is. It's meant to be about half an hour. We sometimes overrun slightly, but shouldn't be too long after 5 when we finish, maybe 10 past. Okay, any criticisms of questionnaires? What's wrong with them? Why might you not use them? Oh, wow, those 30 seconds go fast. I guess I'm into the music. I kind of wanted to go somewhere. Okay, so Holly has said low validity, which, yeah, absolutely. So with the last one, we said there was a problem with reliability. This one, there's definitely a problem with validity, you know, particularly if it is closed questions on the questionnaire. You know, you're sort of forcing people to take one of the options, or you just put other or something, which so you're not getting a true picture of people's opinions. And of course, we've also got dishonest answers, which is true as well. That's a good one. We've also got the researcher can't ask the responders further questions, can't like follow up with questions, might get unanswered questions, might get questionnaires that don't get sent back. So if we look at my list, but some great ones in the there, yeah, it doesn't give a true meaning, yeah, lacks validity. Researcher may impose their own meanings on the participant. So if you get closed questions or leading questions, indeed, it's hard to get a good response rate. We've got an example there of Height only getting 4.5% of her questionnaires back. So quite often you send out all these questionnaires and then you only get a small number of them back. You might have to give some sort of incentive to try and encourage people to return them. And then that could be expensive because you got to enter for a draw for an iPad or a car or something. And you know, you might spend all that time doing your sampling method and working out, oh, I've got 33% of my respondents are going to be, you know, from a particular postcode or whatever, but then you don't have any control of how many of them actually send them back, and it ruins your representativeness. The question may be misinterpreted if the researcher's not present. And you might have issues with literacy, etc. as well, in terms of understanding the question. I think you got a lot of those. That's really good. Well done. I'm going to hand over to Vicky now to consider some strengths and weaknesses of some other methods. So
Super.
see how you do that.
So thank you very much. We've got 2 unbalanced activities this time. So we're going to look at interviews first, and then we're going to think about observations. And again, some of the things that are coming up are things that have already sort of appeared in this revision blast or in ones previously. So we're going to have a look at using interviews to conduct sociological research. So I want you to think firstly of 2 advantages. So there is no timer on this one. It's going to give you a few moments to think about some advantages of using interviews to conduct sociological research. And then in a few moments, we'll then have a look at the disadvantages. So what are the good points? If you were, as a researcher, chose to use interviews to find out the answers to your study, what would make you want to choose it as a method? So let's give you a couple of moments. Think about some of the answers that you've given, some of the negative sides of questionnaires, and think about perhaps how an interview could overcome those. So Jay, so just interviews in general. So we're not worried about specific types of interviews in this stage. We're just thinking about interviews generally. Okay, so a couple of moments to see what you can think of in terms of the advantages. Excellent. We have got a really good
though, isn't it?
Yeah,
good question about what
yeah.
type of interviews. So you could come up with, think of the strengths of the different types of interviews, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously you could be asked that in an exam question, couldn't you? So we've got some good answers coming through. So it does provide flexibility to the interviewer. You've got a large number of people can be interviewed. That obviously you need to have quite a lot of interviewers if you are going to interview quite a large number of respondents there. So Jim, can we have the advantages popped up onto the scales, please? So we have flexibilities already come up. So that's a really good point. So if the interviewee has said something quite interesting, you can actually change direction and you can add in extra questions that could probe that idea a little bit further. And it does also allow those more in-depth and more thoughtful answers, which obviously was a disadvantage of questionnaires. So that's quite an important thing for us. So let's now have a think about the disadvantages. So why perhaps would we not want to use interviews as sociological research? So again, a few more moments. Okay, excellent. We've got a really good answer coming through there. They do provide objectivity. Well done. So let's have a think about some of the negatives. Okay, so what are some of the not? So why might somebody choose not to use interviews? Good. It is time consuming. An excellent answer coming through there. So it takes, there's a big time commitment here. It's physically time consuming, but there are some other reasons it's time consuming that hopefully might come up in the chat window in a moment. So let's have a think. Is there anything else? Think about maybe who is doing the interviews. Good. So we've got Holly coming through with qualitative data is harder to analyse. You're right. And it's then harder to compare. Good. And we have got the idea of the report as well. So structured interviews fail to allow a report. So when we were thinking earlier about the different types of interviews, you can have completely unstructured, semi-structured, or structured interviews. If it's structured, it is difficult to build that rapport. That rapport is all about the relationship, and you need to have a good relationship in place if you are going to get some good, honest answers. And again, that relationship does take a lot of time. So you've got your time commitment anyway for doing the interview in the first place, but also for building up. We've also got interviewer bias on the screen as well. So respondents may answer differently depending on who is conducting the interview. So for example, if that interview was about the effects of violence against females, then the respondents, a female, might feel much happier talking to a woman about that than a man. It is difficult to replicate these as well because they take quite a lot of time. Right,
just going to quickly say there's some good. So I was just going to say there's some good questions, but also some good answers in the chat windows. People were asking about what rapport is. So it's it's a relationship, having a sort of a good relationship between the interviewer and the interviewee, so they kind of bounce off each other and you can get a good response. There was also, Jade made a really good point about group interviews, that strong personalities could completely dominate and things like that.
Yeah,
really good points in there.
Yeah, Perfect. Some great things there. Okay, so the last one that we're looking at is the pros and cons of observation. So again, these have cropped up a few times this session already. So firstly, we're going to think about the advantages of using observation to conduct your sociological research. And then again, we'll have a look at the disadvantages. So I'll give you a couple of moments. Think about some of those good points. So why do people do it? So what do we think? Why would people choose to use observation?
What's good about them?
Yeah,
why might you do it rather than a questionnaire or a...
Let's have a think. We've got some interesting answers coming through the chat window at the moment, but they're not really relevant to what we're asking. so we can get focused back onto the advantages of observations.
Okay, again, as well, if you think about, there are the different types of observations, aren't they? So you might think about the strength of a particular type. We talked about weaknesses of overt observations earlier. Absolutely. You might think of strengths of overt, but also strengths of covert, and there's the participant and non-participant. So that might give you some areas to think about. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, so can we have some advantages up on the screen, please, Jim? So they are in depth. They give you really good insight into the issue being researched, because obviously you're kind of seeing firsthand, and you do get to observe that behaviour in that natural setting. So we talked about this last week, the idea of it being an ethnographic type of research method, because you are seeing people in their natural environment. Super. Right. That then obviously leads, we've got some really good ideas coming through. It does lead to that idea of high validity, because you're getting these in-depth answers. So the more in-depth your answers are, the more valid your research will be. Okay, last thing that we're going to do this afternoon then is we're going to look at the disadvantages of observation, and we have talked about a couple of them already. So have a think about some of the negative sides of using this as an observation method.
Just while you're thinking, there's a question in the chat window asking when the next one of these will be and what the topic will be. I think we'll be back next Monday. I think that's the plan.
Yeah, same time.
We haven't discussed the topic yet. I think we might do another topic mix maybe, or we might look at some questions, might look at 12-mark questions and have a think about that. Okay.
Good. So we have a good answer coming through here. Reliability is low because it is really quite difficult to repeat observations. There's all sorts of reasons why it's difficult to repeat them. Any other answers coming up at the moment? We have done sociological theory, Esme, so please have a look through our previous revision blast, because we've covered theory quite a few times, but again, it is likely to come up in topic mix next week. Excellent. Okay, so let's have some disadvantages on the screen, please, Jim. So because it's time consuming, you generally have a relatively small sample size. So therefore, it does mean it's not quite as representative as some of the other methods, which will therefore affect your results. We've also got those ethical considerations around covert observation particularly. So really, people should have informed consent if they're taking part in your social study. If people find out they're being observed as part of a piece of research and don't want to be, then that can mean that your project has to stop and it's completely wasted your time. And obviously we have also talked about the Hawthorne effect quite a lot and how it can change behaviour. Excellent, some really good ideas. And also that's an interesting one, Esme. The idea of recording information is really a problem when you're doing covert. It's not very easy to stand there with a massive clipboard, is it? So the idea is that you have to, are you going to record people on a recording device? Are you going to try and remember it when you get home? Yeah, it's quite difficult, isn't it? Okay, well done. So some really good answers coming through. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And again, obviously you can watch this again in your own time, and please have a look back at our previous revision blast as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. This is our 10th. If you go to tutor2u.net/live on the replay section and just use the filter GCSE Sociology, you'll be able to see the replays of this and all the other sessions. But also you can download all the PowerPoints as well. So if you want to sort of take a look through those, maybe try some of the questions on your own. Some fantastic stuff in there, research methods, all the key studies, and all the key topics like stratification and family and what have you. So well worth doing if you've got some assessments coming up soon. Huge thanks as always to Vicky and to Duncan for taking some time out today to put the session together. If you enjoyed it, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube to help suggest this session to, there we go, Duncan's showing you what to do, to helps the YouTube algorithm. It's a good kind of algorithm to suggest this content to other GCSE sociology students. We will be putting on the time and the date and the topic for next week on our YouTube channel very, very soon. So keep a lookout for that. And hopefully if you've got assessments coming up in the next few days, all the best to you with those. We hope you go well. So from Vicky, Duncan and I, we'll catch you soon. See you later.
Yeah.
Cheers,
See you
guys.
next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.